One of ancient Egypt's most powerful rulers simply vanished. Her name was Nefertiti, and her sudden disappearance from history is a mystery that has haunted us for over 3,000 years. She stood beside Pharaoh Akhenaten as his equal, a revolutionary queen who helped rule an empire from the dazzling sun city of Amarna. Then, around the year 1336 BC, she was gone. Every record of her life stops. No tomb, no mummy, no explanation. By the end of this investigation, you will understand the three leading theories behind her fate and the shocking new evidence that could finally solve this ancient cold case. We will explore whether she was murdered, banished, or if she pulled off history's greatest disappearing act by secretly becoming king. What you believe happens when a queen of the Nile simply fades from existence. Her story begins not in Egypt, but likely in a foreign land. Nefertiti's origins are shrouded in some mystery, with many scholars believing she was a princess from the kingdom of Mitanni, sent to forge a political alliance through marriage. She arrived in Egypt and wed the young prince who would become Pharaoh Akhenaten, but this was no ordinary royal union. Akhenaten was a radical, a visionary who aimed to shatter 1,500 years of tradition. He declared that the countless gods of Egypt were false, and that there was only one true deity to worship, the sun disk known as the Aten. This was a religious earthquake. To cement this revolution, he abandoned the ancient capital of Thebes and built an entirely new city from the desert sands, a gleaming metropolis dedicated to the Aten called Amarna. Here, in this sun-baked city of innovation, Nefertiti's power blossomed. She was far more than a ceremonial queen. In the art of the Amarna period, she is depicted with a frequency and prominence no Egyptian queen had ever held before. She stands shoulder to shoulder with Akhenaten, not behind him. She is shown driving her own chariot, an image of ultimate authority. Most astonishingly, she is carved into temple walls in the classic pharaonic pose of smiting Egypt's enemies with a mace. This was a role reserved exclusively for the king, a divine act meant to show his power to maintain order over chaos. For a queen to be shown in this pose was unprecedented. It tells us she was not just his wife, she was his co-ruler, a religious and political partner in the most radical overhaul of Egyptian society ever attempted. Her face, with its iconic, elegant features, became the symbol of the new regime. This immense, publicly celebrated power is precisely what makes her sudden erasure from history so profoundly baffling. How could a woman who stood as a pharaoh in all but name simply vanish without a trace? That face, the one we all recognize, was lost to the world for over 3,000 years. Its rediscovery was almost as dramatic as the queen's own disappearance. In December 1912, German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt was excavating the ruins of a long-lost Amarna workshop when his team uncovered something extraordinary buried in the rubble. It was a limestone bust, stunningly lifelike, depicting a woman of breathtaking and sophisticated beauty. Borchardt himself was so captivated he later wrote in his diary, "It is useless to describe it, you have to see it." This was, of course, the bust of Nefertiti. The artifact was so perfectly preserved, with its vibrant colors still fresh, it seemed to have been created just yesterday. It was immediately hailed as a masterpiece, a pinnacle of ancient art. But this single object did more than just showcase artistic skill. It single-handedly resurrected a forgotten queen for the modern era, giving a face to the mysterious name. We must remember, however, that this bust was never meant for a tomb. It was a sculptor's model, a reference piece for creating other official portraits. This means it was designed to project an ideal, not necessarily to capture a photograph-like reality. Every detail was intentional. The tall, blue crown, unique to her, symbolized her power. The elegant lines of her face and elongated neck were crafted to embody a specific, divine beauty standard of the Amarna period. This is the image that has launched 1,000 theories, the face we cannot escape when we try to solve the mystery of her fate. But what if our entire perception of Nefertiti is being filtered through this one perfect and potentially idealized image? The bust itself holds a tantalizing clue to its own complex story. Look closely, and you will see the left eye socket is empty, while the right eye is perfectly formed from rock crystal. this was not damage from the passage of time. Evidence suggests the eye was never installed. Was the bust simply unfinished, abandoned when the workshop was destroyed, or does the missing eye carry a deeper, symbolic meaning, a silent message from the artist about a queen who is no longer whole, or perhaps no longer even present? This iconic face, for all its beauty, may be the very thing that obscures the real woman from our view. We are left to wonder if we are searching for a legend or for a person. The silence of the Egyptian records is broken by the voices of kings from distant lands. In 1887, a local woman digging for sebak, an ancient mud brick fertilizer, stumbled upon a hidden archive. This was not a grand tomb, but a library of clay tablets, inscribed in the cuneiform script of international diplomacy. We know them today as the Amarna Letters. These 382 tablets are the diplomatic cables of their day, a raw and unfiltered glimpse into the geopolitical dramas of the 14th century BC. And within this cache, we find Nefertiti's name. Foreign rulers, from the kings of Babylon to the princes of Mitanni, did not write only to Pharaoh Akhenaten. They wrote directly to Queen Nefertiti, addressing her with the highest honors and seeking her influence in matters of state. One Babylonian king, Bernabariash II, complains bitterly to Nefertiti about the poor quality of the gold he received from Egypt, a clear indication that she was involved in, or at least perceived to be involved in, the economic and diplomatic exchanges of the empire. This was not mere flattery. In the intricate dance of ancient diplomacy, you only waste your clay and your scribes on someone who holds real power. These letters prove that on the world stage, Nefertiti was seen as a sovereign in her own right, a crucial conduit to the pharaoh's ear, and a political force to be reckoned with. Her sudden removal from this delicate international network would have sent shockwaves across the ancient Near East. Alliances were fragile, trade agreements were complex, and the balance of power was always in flux. If the queen, who personally corresponded with foreign leaders, simply vanished one day, it would have created a diplomatic vacuum, a rupture in communications that foreign courts would have noticed immediately. The very fact that we have these letters, but no Egyptian record of her death or departure, makes her disappearance all the more politically charged and suspicious. Why would a regime so meticulous in its propaganda, so careful to chisel its new truth into stone, leave such a gaping hole in its own story? The answer must be that her vanishing was not a simple ending, but a critical part of the story itself. The last time we see Nefertiti in her full glory is a scene of royal power and familial unity. It is the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, and the city of Amarna is buzzing with celebration for a grand event, the reception of foreign tribute. In a series of carved stone blocks, we see the royal family together one final time. Akhenaten and Nefertiti sit side by side on their thrones, their daughters around them, as envoys from distant lands bow before them, presenting lavish gifts. Nefertiti is depicted with all her titles and regalia, her iconic blue crown upon her head, a living symbol of the Aten's divine power on earth. She is unmistakably the queen. And then the curtain falls. After this vibrant public display, every carving, every inscription, every mention of Queen Nefertiti stops. It is as if she walked off that stone block and into a void. The silence that follows is not merely an absence, it is a profound and deliberate erasure. For the remaining 5 or so years of Akhenaten's rule, the woman who was once a co-ruler, a religious partner, and a diplomatic correspondent simply vanishes from the official record. There are no monuments to her death, no funeral texts, no tomb preparations that we can definitively link to her. In a culture that documented everything from a pharaoh's victory to a farmer's tax receipt, this sudden silence is a scream. What catastrophic event could have prompted a regime so obsessed with its own image to chisel its most visible female figure out of existence? Did she fall from grace, or was she removed to ensure someone else could rise? The most straightforward explanation is often the most tragic. What if the great queen simply fell ill and died? Around the time Nefertiti vanishes from history, archaeological evidence suggests a devastating plague may have swept through the city of Amarna. Excavations of the commoners' graves there reveal a population in poor health. suffering from high rates of disease and malnutrition. The city was new, crowded, and its sanitation may have been inadequate, creating a perfect breeding ground for a deadly contagion. In the ancient world, pandemics were a terrifying and regular feature of life. We know from other records that a plague, often called the Asiatic illness, was ravaging the neighboring Hittite Empire around the same time, and it is entirely plausible it traveled along trade routes to strike at the heart of Egypt. If such a sickness reached Amarna, it would not have distinguished between commoner and queen. The royal family would have been just as vulnerable. This theory offers a clean, if heartbreaking, answer. Nefertiti, the powerful co-pharaoh, could have succumbed to a swift and merciless illness, leaving Akhenaten and the court in stunned mourning. Yet this simple answer is fraught with complications. If the queen died of plague, where is her tomb? In ancient Egypt, especially for a ruler of her stature, death was not an end but a transition, and the preparation for the afterlife was a meticulous, sacred process. A royal death from disease would not have halted the construction of a tomb or the performance of elaborate funeral rites. In fact, during a time of crisis, ensuring the queen's proper passage to the afterlife would have been more critical than ever, a necessary ritual to restore cosmic order. We have not found her mummy, her sarcophagus, or a burial chamber inscribed with her name. The silence is not just the silence of death, but the silence of a missing funeral. Could grief alone explain such a profound and total erasure? A plague might account for her death, but it cannot account for her disappearance. There is another, deeply personal tragedy that could have claimed the queen. Nefertiti was a mother of 6 daughters, and in the ancient world, every single pregnancy was a dance with death. Childbirth was one of the leading causes of mortality for women, regardless of their status. The most advanced medical knowledge of the time offered little protection against hemorrhage, infection, or obstructed labor. A queen, for all her power and privilege, was just as vulnerable in the birthing chamber as any farmer's wife. It is a hauntingly plausible scenario. Perhaps during the birth of a 7th child, a longed-for son, the queen suffered a catastrophic complication. Her life could have ebbed away in a matter of hours, leaving the royal court and a pharaoh who depended on her as his equal utterly devastated. Such a death, while profoundly tragic, would have been a private family matter, not a public state affair. How would a culture that deified its rulers record such a human, intimate failure? The official propaganda of Amarna was built on a foundation of perfection, of the royal family as divine, flawless intermediaries of the Aten's power. A death in childbirth, a messy and fundamentally female tragedy, may not have fit the narrative. It would have revealed a vulnerability the regime could not afford to acknowledge. Her passing might have been quietly noted in palace records that have long since turned to dust, while her public image was simply allowed to fade for new monuments, a silent tribute to a loss too painful to chisel into stone. Yet, even this theory, so deeply human in its tragedy, cannot fully explain the totality of her erasure. We know of other royal women who died in childbirth, and their memories were still honored with tombs and offerings. For Nefertiti to receive nothing, not even a whisper of a burial, suggests something more than grief was at work. Was her death not just a personal loss, but a political catastrophe that had to be hidden? But a natural death, however tragic, cannot account for the sheer violence of her erasure. This leads us to a darker, more political possibility. What if Queen Nefertiti did not die, but was deliberately removed from power? The theory of a fall from grace suggests she became a victim of the very court intrigues she once mastered. After years of ruling as an equal, a rift could have formed between her and Akhenaten. Perhaps she disagreed with his increasingly extreme religious policies, or maybe she challenged his authority one too many times. In the pressurized environment of a revolutionary court, allies can quickly become rivals. Her greatest vulnerability may have been the one thing she could not control, her failure to provide a male heir. With 6 daughters and no son to continue the new Atenist dynasty, the political future of Amarna was precarious. Akhenaten might have been pressured to set her aside, to take a new wife who could give him the boy the kingdom needed. A powerful queen, stripped of her position, would be a dangerous enemy. Exile or confinement within a remote palace might have been the only way to neutralize her influence without causing a civil war. We have a chilling precedent for this in the fate of another queen, the legendary Hatshepsut. After her death, her stepson systematically had her images and cartouches chiseled off monuments across Egypt. This practice is known as damnatio memoriae, a Latin phrase meaning the condemnation of memory. It was not merely an act of petty revenge. It was a magical and political erasure designed to destroy a person's soul and their legacy for all eternity. If Nefertiti suffered this fate, it would perfectly explain the absolute silence that follows her. Every statue defaced, every inscription containing her name meticulously recarved, every mural painted over to show Akhenaten ruling alone. The official artists of Amarna would have been ordered to chisel the queen's familiar face from the stone, leaving behind only ghostly outlines where a powerful woman once stood. But this theory, too, confronts a difficult question. If she was banished and her memory condemned, why was the beautiful bust in the sculptor's workshop left perfectly intact, seemingly abandoned but not destroyed? It is as if the order to erase her never reached that one small room, leaving behind a single, stunning clue to a mystery that refuses to be solved. The mysterious figure of Kir rises from the ruins of Amarna like a ghost, her presence hinting at a profound shift in the royal household. She appears in the records as a secondary wife of Akhenaten, a woman given the unique and intimate title of the greatly beloved wife. For a time, she was celebrated in her own right, with her image and name inscribed on precious vessels and even in the royal tomb itself. Her sudden prominence is a puzzle that directly intersects with Nefertiti's vanishing act. It is as if a new star flared brightly in the court just as the old one began to dim. This timing has led many to speculate about a fierce harem rivalry, a struggle for the pharaoh's favor that Nefertiti ultimately lost. The logic seems compelling on the surface. Perhaps Kia, younger and potentially from a powerful family, threatened the queen's position. The ultimate prize in this silent war would have been a male heir. Nefertiti had given Akhenaten 6 daughters, but no son to secure the dynasty. If Kia were to present the pharaoh with the long-awaited boy, her status would be instantly transformed, and the co-ruler queen could be seen as obsolete. In the ruthless calculus of royal politics, a queen who fails to produce a male heir is a liability. Nefertiti, for all her power, was not immune to this ancient and brutal reality. Her unparalleled authority might have made her a target, her very prominence making a fall from grace that much more dramatic and absolute. We can almost hear the whispers in the sun-baked corridors of the palace, the shifting alliances, the anxious glances. Did Akhenaten's heart simply turn toward a new favorite, leaving his once great partner isolated and powerless? The evidence, however, is far from clear. The theory of Kia as the triumphant rival is shadowed by her own mysterious fate. Just as suddenly as she appeared, Kia too vanishes from the monumental record. Her images were often recarved, her inscriptions replaced, not with Nefertiti's name, but with the names of Akhenaten's daughters. This suggests that Kia also fell out of favor, or perhaps met an even worse end. So what does this mean for Nefertiti? If both women were erased, the story becomes less about a simple rivalry and more about a king systematically rewriting his own history, removing pieces from the board as his grand revolution began to crumble. The fate of Kia does not solve the mystery of Nefertiti, it only deepens it, pulling us toward a third, even more astonishing possibility. The silence surrounding Nefertiti is broken by the sudden appearance of a phantom king. In the final, chaotic years of Akhenaten's reign, a new co-ruler emerges from the shadows. His name is Smenkhkare, a figure so obscure and fleeting that he seems to be made of smoke. He appears in a handful of inscriptions, always alongside Akhenaten, sharing the throne as an equal. And then, just as quickly, he is gone. The evidence for this mysterious king is thin, but what exists is electrifying. A single small wine docket, a label for a jar, bears his name alongside that of his great royal wife, Meritaten, who is notably the eldest daughter of Nefertiti and Akhenaten. This is the crucial link. Why would the heir to the throne, the Princess Meritaten, be married to a complete stranger of no prior importance, unless this stranger was not a stranger at all? The theory posits that Nefertiti, facing a crisis of succession and a crumbling revolution, performed the ultimate political maneuver. She shed her identity as the queen and reinvented herself as King Smenkhkare. In doing so, she would have transformed from a powerful consort into a legitimate male pharaoh, a co-ruler who could directly inherit the throne from her husband and secure their religious legacy. This was not merely a change of name, it was a metamorphosis. To rule alone, a woman might need to become a man. The artistic evidence adds a profound layer of intrigue. The few surviving depictions of Smenkhkare are executed in the distinctive, exaggerated style of the late Amarna period. The body shape, the long, fine features, the stylistic flourishes, all bear an uncanny resemblance to the known portraits of Nefertiti. Even more telling, some statues believed to be of Smenkhkare display a curious androgyny, with a slender, almost feminine physique combined with the regalia of a male king. Could these be the artistic fingerprints of a queen trying to navigate a new, masculine identity? The ancient Egyptian worldview was built on the concept of Ma'at, or cosmic order, which demanded a male king to maintain balance. For the Atenist revolution to survive Akhenaten, it needed a male successor. If Nefertiti was the only one with the will, the intelligence, and the authority to steer the ship of state, then becoming Smenkhkare was not just an option, it was a necessity. This theory transforms her disappearance from a tragedy into a masterstroke of political survival. She did not vanish, she transcended. She walked into a chamber as the queen and emerged as the king. But if this is true, what terrible fate awaited this new king, and why was her final tomb lost to the sands? The evidence for Smenkhkare is sparse, but each fragment tells a compelling story. A small, damaged limestone slab, known as a talatat, shows two kings seated together under the rays of the Aten. One is clearly Akhenaten, the other, labeled as Smenkhkare, mirrors his posture and style with an intimacy that suggests more than just a co-regency. Their bodies are depicted with the same slender hips, elongated faces, and full lips that characterize the art of Nefertiti. This is not the portrayal of a distinct male successor, but of a perfect double, a reflection of the reigning king. The artistic continuity is too precise to be a coincidence. It is as if the same royal model was used, but the inscription was changed. Even more telling is the fate of Smenkhkare's own monuments. On the few surviving artifacts bearing his name, we find the unmistakable scars of a later erasure. His royal cartouche, the oval ring that enclosed a pharaoh's name, has been carefully chiseled away. This is not random vandalism. It is the systematic work of official damnatio memoriae, the same practice used on Queen Nefertiti. Why would a legitimate male pharaoh, even a brief one, need to be erased from history with such deliberate force? The answer may lie in the identity he was meant to conceal. If Smenkhkare was truly Nefertiti in a new role, then her erasure had to happen twice. First, the queen was removed from the record, and then after her death, the king she became was also scrubbed clean. This double obliteration would have been necessary to completely sever the tainted Amarna lineage from the throne and restore the old gods. The act of recarving cartouches becomes a powerful clue. On one ceremonial ring, the name of Smenkhkare has been meticulously ground out and replaced with the name of the next in line, the boy king Tutankhamun. This is a political palimpsest, a literal rewriting of history to create a new, acceptable royal line. It suggests that those who came after viewed Smenkhkare's reign as an illegitimate interlude, a chapter so dangerous it had to be physically scraped from the jewelry and monuments of Egypt. What secret was so threatening that it required this two-stage historical cleanse? The figure of Smenkhkare stands at the heart of it, a phantom king who may have been the most brilliant disguise ever worn by a queen. The stage was set for a crisis the moment Akhenaten drew his last breath. His radical revolution died with him, leaving behind a spiritual and political vacuum. A broken empire needed a leader, but who would it be? The crown did not pass to a seasoned general or a powerful prince. It was placed upon the head of a child, a boy no more than 8 or 9 years old. His name was Tutankhaten, meaning the living image of the Aten. We know him today as Tutankhamun. A child cannot rule an empire alone. Behind the golden throne stood the true architects of the restoration, a circle of powerful men who had survived the Amarna experiment. The most influential of these was the Vizier I, an elderly statesman who had served Akhenaten loyally. He was likely the brother of Queen Tiye, Akhenaten's mother, making him the boy king's great-uncle. I became the power behind the throne, the seasoned hand guiding the young pharaoh's every decision. But where was Nefertiti in this fragile new order? If she was truly Smenkhkare, she would have reigned for a brief period after her husband's death, a final, fleeting attempt to hold the Atenist line. Her sudden disappearance, whether by death or another means, is what created the power vacuum that I so expertly filled. The boy King Tutankhamun was a pawn in a much larger game, a living symbol used to legitimize the return to the old ways. Under I's guidance, the court abandoned the city of Amarna, leaving its sun-baked palaces to the desert. They returned to the traditional capital of Thebes and its powerful priesthood. The young king's name was changed from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, a public declaration that the god Amun was restored to his former glory. The temples of the old gods were reopened, their cults revived. It was a complete and utter repudiation of everything Akhenaten and Nefertiti had built. This calculated restoration required a deliberate rewriting of history. The entire Amarna period, with its singular god and powerful queen, was deemed a dangerous heresy. The names of Akhenaten and Nefertiti were systematically chiseled from the monuments, their existence officially forgotten. If Nefertiti had indeed ruled as Smenkhkare, her memory would have been a double threat, a ghost that needed to be buried twice. The quiet, methodical erasure we see in the archaeological record is the work of men like I, stabilizing a kingdom by surgically removing a traumatic chapter from its story. They needed a clean slate, and that meant the revolutionary queen, in every form she may have taken, had to vanish forever. What does the fate of this famous boy king reveal about the dangerous legacy he inherited? The sands of the Valley of the Kings guard their secrets with a fierce silence, but modern science has given us the tools to listen. In the dark confines of Tomb Kivi 35, archaeologists found a cache of royal mummies, moved and hidden by ancient priests for their own protection. Among them was an anonymous body known only as the Younger Lady. She was a tragic figure, her face brutally smashed, a violent act of posthumous hatred. For decades, her identity was a complete mystery, until a team of geneticists extracted DNA from her ancient bones. The results were a thunderclap in the world of Egyptology. The analysis revealed that this woman was the daughter of one mummy in the tomb, known as the Elder Lady, and shockingly, the mother of the boy King Tutankhamun. We know the Elder Lady with near certainty to be Queen Tiye, the mother of Akhenaten. This makes the Younger Lady a full sister to Akhenaten and the mother of his son, Tutankhamun. This genetic bombshell seems to solve one mystery, only to create a far more controversial one. If the Younger Lady is the sister wife of Akhenaten and mother of Tut, then the only candidate who fits that description, in the eyes of many, is Nefertiti herself. The argument is compellingly simple. The mummy is the right age, dating to the Amarna period. She was clearly a royal woman of immense importance, given the care of her initial burial and the violence of her later desecration. And she fits the unique genetic profile of being both the sister of Akhenaten and the mother of his heir. Proponents of this theory point to the mummy's striking, regal features, visible even through the damage, and see the elegant bone structure of the famous bust. For them, the case is closed. The lost queen has been found, yet the scientific data has ignited a firestorm of debate, not settled one. The core of the controversy lies in that very same genetic relationship. If the Younger Lady is Nefertiti, and she is the full sister of Akhenaten, then Nefertiti must have been a daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye. This would mean she was not a foreign princess, but was raised in the royal palace, marrying her own brother to maintain the pure divine bloodline. While brother-sister marriage was not uncommon for pharaohs, it creates a profound historical problem. There is not a single inscription, not one piece of contemporary evidence, that ever refers to Nefertiti as the king's daughter, a title she would have held from birth if she were a daughter of Amenhotep III. Her sudden appearance in the records as the great royal wife is abrupt, with no mention of her royal parentage. This silence is deafening. How could a daughter of a great pharaoh, destined to marry the next king, be completely absent from the monumental record of her father's reign? Skeptics argue this is an insurmountable obstacle. They suggest the younger lady is another, unknown sister of Akhenaten, perhaps the mysterious Princess Sidamun or Iset, who bore him a son, but who history has largely forgotten. They question the contamination of the DNA samples after centuries in a non-sterile environment, and they point to the fact that a genetic relationship does not, by itself, provide a name. The mummy is biologically the mother of Tutankhamun, but whether she is the political and religious figure we know as Nefertiti remains an open and fiercely contested question. The violence done to her body, however, speaks volumes. Someone, after the fall of Amarna, wanted to ensure this woman could not see or breathe in the afterlife. Such a specific, vengeful act of destruction is rarely performed on a minor royal. It is the kind of hatred reserved for a central architect of a hated regime. The desecration whispers a name that the DNA cannot quite confirm. While the younger lady ignited a firestorm of debate, she was not the only mysterious woman found in that hidden royal cache. Lying beside her was an older mummy, known to archaeologists as the Elder Woman. This regal figure, with her long, flowing white hair still perfectly preserved, has long been identified with a high degree of certainty as Queen Tiye, the powerful mother of Akhenaten. Her presence there makes perfect sense as a revered matriarch of the dynasty, yet some researchers have looked past the established identification and asked a startling question. What if we have been wrong all along? What if the Elder Woman is not Tiye, but is actually the mummy of Nefertiti herself? This radical theory pivots on a few key observations. The Elder Woman was determined to be around 45 years old at the time of her death. If Nefertiti rose to power as a young woman and reigned for about 15 years, her age at death could align perfectly with this estimate. Proponents of this idea point to the mummy's physical presence, her stately bearing even in death, as befitting a woman who held supreme power. They also note the violence inflicted upon her remains. Her chest was smashed in, her mouth and face damaged, a desecration that often targeted figures deemed enemies of the state long after their death. Such vengeful destruction seems excessive for the well-loved Queen Tiye, but it would be fitting for the reviled co-architect of the Amarna heresy. The theory gains a sliver of circumstantial evidence from her burial context. She was found carefully rewrapped and hidden alongside other 18th dynasty royals, a sign of respect from the priests who rescued these bodies from looters. This suggests that, despite the desecration, her fundamental royal identity was still known and honored by those who moved her. If she were Nefertiti, it would mean the restorers of the old order knew exactly who she was and still deemed her worthy of a secret royal reburial, perhaps out of respect for her earlier, legitimate role before the religious revolution went too far. This creates a forensic puzzle of incredible complexity. We are now faced with two female mummies from the same tomb, each with a compelling, yet mutually exclusive, claim to be the lost queen. One is genetically the mother of King Tut, the other is older and bears the marks of profound posthumous hatred. The evidence pulls us in two different directions, forcing us to question every assumption. If the elder woman is Nefertiti, then who is the younger lady, the biological mother of Tutankhamun? She would have to be a lesser wife or a sister of Akhenaten, her name lost to time. And if the elder woman is Queen Tiye, then the younger lady remains the prime candidate, a sister wife whose existence was systematically erased. Science has given us the pieces, but they can be arranged to tell more than one story. This duality lies at the heart of the mystery, proving that even the most advanced technology cannot easily quiet the echoes of a 3,000-year-old silence. The ultimate prize in this 3,000-year-old mystery is a sealed chamber, a tomb untouched by looters and time. The search for Nefertiti's final resting place has become a modern obsession, driving archaeologists to scan the very bedrock of Egypt with the most advanced technology we possess. The hunt began in the desolate cliffs behind her own city. The royal tomb at Amarna is a haunting, unfinished place, a monument to a revolution that died. Within its sprawling chambers, archaeologists found smashed fragments of a sarcophagus, its golden inlays ripped away, The name on the shards was not Nefertiti's, but that of the secondary wife, Kia. The most telling discovery, however, was a series of scenes carved into the walls depicting the mourning of a royal woman. The images are heartbreakingly intimate, showing the royal family in raw, personal grief. But the name of the deceased has been meticulously chiseled out by a later hand. This act of erasure, in a place of such sorrow, points directly to someone the restorers wanted to forget. Could this desecrated mourning scene be the only funeral Nefertiti ever received? A memorial later vandalized to sever her from eternity itself, yet no body was found there. The tomb was abandoned, leaving the Amarna cliffs silent and empty. This failure sent the search back to the traditional burial ground of pharaohs. The Valley of the Kings holds its secrets tight, but one tomb there is always whispered of more. The burial of Tutankhamun, discovered by Howard Carter, is famously small and seemingly rushed, more like a wealthy noble's tomb than a pharaoh's. Its unusual layout has sparked a radical theory. What if Tutankhamun was buried in the antechamber of a much larger, grander tomb, a tomb belonging to his predecessor? In 2015, radar scans of the walls in Tutankhamun's burial chamber sent a jolt of excitement around the world. The data suggested the presence of two previously unknown voids, one directly behind the north wall, which was covered in unique religious scenes. The scan results indicated a large, empty space, possibly a corridor, and another chamber. The dimensions hinted at a tomb of royal proportions, lying in wait just beyond the painted plaster. Could this be the lost burial of Nefertiti, sealed away behind the treasure-filled walls of the boy king? The theory is breathtaking. It would mean that when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, his officials, desperate for a ready-made tomb, broke through a sealed doorway into the outer corridors of Nefertiti's grand, prepared burial. They buried the young king in what was meant to be her antechamber, then replastered the wall, hiding the entrance to the queen's own chamber forever. This would explain the tomb's small size, its odd orientation, and the uniquely feminine artwork on the north wall, which some argue depicts the rituals of a royal woman's burial. Despite the initial excitement, subsequent scans have yielded conflicting results, with some teams claiming to confirm the voids and others finding only solid rock. The Egyptian authorities have been cautious, prioritizing the preservation of the fragile tomb over invasive drilling. For now, the truth remains trapped behind that decorated wall, a ghost of a chamber that teases us with its potential. The frustration is palpable. We can send rovers to Mars, but we cannot see a few inches into the limestone behind a 3,000-year-old painting. The search continues, not just in Tutankhamun's tomb, but across the entire valley, with ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging scanning the ground for any hidden signature of a lost queen. Each unexcavated shaft and every anomalous reading keeps the hope alive. Her tomb is out there, a time capsule from the Amarna age, waiting for the moment when a final, careful probe will solve the greatest disappearing act in history. The most tantalizing clue does not come from a mummy, but from the very walls of the most famous tomb ever discovered. British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves studied the painted scenes in Tutankhamun's burial chamber and noticed something everyone else had missed. The artwork was not created for a king. His meticulous analysis revealed that the famous scenes on the north wall, showing a ritual called the opening of the mouth, were painted over an earlier, plastered-up doorway. Even more telling, the figure performing the ceremony on Tutankhamun's mummy is not a high priest as a standard, but the pharaoh Eye, depicted in the full regalia of a king. This is a funeral conducted by one pharaoh for his predecessor, a unique and deeply personal moment captured for eternity. Why would this intimate scene be hidden on a wall that was originally a sealed doorway? Reeves' radical hypothesis is that we are looking at the tomb all wrong. He believes Kv 62 was never intended for Tutankhamun. Instead, the young king was buried in the outer corridor of a much larger, pre-existing tomb that belonged to Nefertiti. The evidence is in the architecture itself. The tomb's axis bends at an unusual angle, and its total size is surprisingly small for a pharaoh. If you look at the floor plan, the main burial chamber is not centered. It sits off to the side, as if it were merely an antechamber leading to a more significant, sealed space beyond a north wall. In this theory, when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, his court was desperate. A royal tomb takes years to carve and decorate. They needed a burial place immediately, so they broke through the sealed doorway of Nefertiti's grand tomb, using its outer halls for the boy king, and then replastered and painted over the entrance to the inner sanctum, the queen's own burial chamber, to hide it forever. This would explain everything: the rushed decoration, the reused artifacts, and the strange, non-royal proportions of the space. The radar scans seem to confirm this breathtaking idea. Initial surveys detected distinct voids behind both the north and west walls of the burial chamber, with one scan suggesting the presence of metallic and organic objects within them. The data pointed to a corridor-like space leading to another chamber, its dimensions fitting those of an Egyptian queen's tomb. For a moment, it felt like the mystery was seconds from being solved, that a single tap of a hammer could reveal a chamber untouched for 33 centuries. Yet, the wall remained standing. Subsequent radar surveys commissioned by the Egyptian authorities produced conflicting results, with some teams finding only solid, layered rock. The science became as debated as the history. Was the signal an echo from a natural fissure in the limestone, or the clear signature of a man-made corridor? The uncertainty is a perfect reflection of the mystery itself, a story of tantalizing clues and frustrating dead ends. The potential reward is so immense, and the risk of damaging Tutankhamun's fragile tomb so great, that the decision to drill even a tiny hole for a camera has been postponed again and again. We are left staring at a painted wall, knowing that the answer to one of history's greatest riddles could be just inches away, separated from us by a layer of plaster and 3,000 years of silence. The royal tomb at Amarna is a skeleton of a monument, its corridors abandoned to the desert wind. Unlike the grand, hidden sepulchres in the Valley of the Kings, this tomb feels raw and exposed, a project left brutally unfinished. The walls themselves bear the scars of a vengeful purge. In the innermost chambers, you can still see the ghostly outlines of the royal family bathed in the Aten's rays, but the faces and names of Akhenaten and Nefertiti have been meticulously hacked away. The chisel marks are not random. They are precise, focused, and systematic, targeting the cartouches that held their very identities. This was not the work of common looters seeking gold. This was a calculated act of political and religious annihilation, ordered from the highest levels of the new regime. The erasure was meant to be magical, to destroy their souls and their legacy for all eternity. The hatred required to send artisans back into this tomb with hammers and chisels, to personally deface the images of their former divine rulers, is almost palpable. It speaks of a deep, seething rage against the entire Amarna experiment, a desire to purify Egypt by physically scraping the memory of its architects from the stone. What could inspire such a violent reaction? The answer lies in the economic and spiritual chaos left in the revolution's wake. For nearly 2 decades, the cults of the old gods like Ammon had been suppressed, their temples closed, and their immense wealth diverted to the Aten. This did not just offend the powerful priesthoods, it shattered the economy and alienated the common people who had worshipped these gods for generations. The systematic destruction in the tomb is the final, furious act of a country reclaiming its identity, a nation so traumatized by this single god experiment that it sought to literally chisel the heresy out of its own history. The silence in that tomb is not empty, it is a roar of condemnation. One piece of broken limestone holds the entire story of her fall. It is known as the Corrigency Stela, a small slab discovered in the ruins of Amarna, and it is a crime scene frozen in time. Originally, the carving showed 2 royal figures seated side by side under the rays of the Aten. On the left was Akhenaten, and on the right, in a position of absolute equality, was Nefertiti. They were a pair, the dual rulers of the new sun cult. But then, at some later point, a hand took a chisel to the stone. The name and figure of Nefertiti were carefully, deliberately scraped away, and a new image was carved directly over the ghostly outline of the old queen. The replacement was one of her own daughters, the Princess Ankhesenaten. This was not an update. It was a targeted assassination of memory. The stela tells us that after her disappearance, Nefertiti's likeness was not merely abandoned or left to fade. It was actively and surgically replaced. Someone in a position of authority ordered an artisan to enter a sacred space and physically alter a religious monument to remove her. This goes beyond a simple fall from favor. It suggests her very image had become toxic, a dangerous symbol that needed to be swapped out for a safer, less threatening alternative. Why replace her with a daughter? The choice is deeply revealing. A daughter represented continuity of the royal bloodline without the political weight of the queen herself. Akhenaten was a part of the family, a legitimate heir, but she did not carry the revolutionary authority or the cult-like status of her mother. By substituting the daughter for the queen, the regime could maintain the visual propaganda of a complete royal family while surgically excising its most powerful and problematic member. It was a way to rewrite history without leaving a blank space, to pretend the co-ruler had never existed, and that a younger, more pliable woman had always been in her place. This single, altered stone is a perfect metaphor for the fate of Amarna itself. The revolution was not just ended, it was retroactively edited, its history chiseled and recarved until it told a new, more acceptable story. The violence of the act is quiet, but its message is thunderous. Nefertiti had become so dangerous that even her shadow on the stone was a threat that had to be erased. Yet the evidence for the elder lady being Queen Tiye is so strong it forms a nearly unbreakable chain. Her identity is anchored by a single, intimate artifact discovered in the tomb of her grandson, Tutankhamun. Among the boy king's vast collection of treasures was a small, carefully preserved lock of hair. It was tucked away in a miniature coffinet, a sacred relic from a beloved ancestor. Modern forensic analysis compared the DNA from this hair to the genetic material of the elder lady's mummy. The match was perfect. This lock of hair, buried with a pharaoh as a cherished family heirloom, belonged indisputably to the woman lying in Kivi 35. This genetic link, combined with the mummy's regal presence and advanced age, solidifies her identity as Tiye, the great royal wife of Amenhotep III and mother of the heretic king, Akhenaten. For many scholars, this single piece of evidence closes the case. The elder lady cannot be Nefertiti because we know exactly who she is. She is the matriarch, the grandmother of the dynasty, a figure whose legacy was respected enough by the restorers of the old gods to be saved and reburied with honor. Her long, flowing white hair speaks of a life fully lived, a woman who died of natural causes long after her son's revolution had begun. To suggest she is Nefertiti would be to ignore this direct, physical connection to Tutankhamun's own burial goods. It would mean that a lock of Nefertiti's hair was venerated as a family treasure by the very regime that sought to erase her, a contradiction that is difficult to reconcile. The DNA does not lie. The hair in Tutankhamun's tomb whispers the name of his grandmother, and it is the name Tiye. So if the elder lady is truly the queen mother, then the mystery of Nefertiti's mummy swings back toward the younger lady, and the debate over that tragic, desecrated body begins all over again. The chisel marks on Nefertiti's monuments were just the beginning. With the collapse of the Amarna regime, a tidal wave of restoration washed over Egypt, a deliberate and organized campaign to purge the kingdom of its radical past. The city of Amarna itself was abandoned, its elegant palaces and open-air temples left to crumble back into the desert. The stone from its buildings was systematically quarried, carted away to be used as filler in new constructions, physically burying the heresy within the walls of Orthodox monuments. This was not random decay, it was a calculated recycling of a failed dream. The true focus of the purge was the god Aten. The temples dedicated to the sun disk were torn down, their altars smashed. The vast estates and revenues that had been funneled to the Aten's priesthood were seized and returned to the traditional cults, especially the powerful priests of Amun. The name of Amun, which Akhenaten had so meticulously chiseled from every monument he could find, was now carefully recarved, a symbolic healing of the nation's stone skin. This was a national project of forgetting, orchestrated by the men who took power, like the Vizier I, to stabilize a fractured kingdom. They needed to reassure the people, the army, and the bureaucracy that the old order, the one that had made Egypt great for over 1,000 years, was back. In such a fervent climate of restoration, where an entire 17-year experiment was being scrubbed from history, what chance did the memory of a single queen have? Her true fate, whether she died in the plague, was murdered, or ruled as a king, would have been an inconvenient detail, a loose thread in the new old tapestry of Egypt. The organized oblivion that swallowed the city of the horizon, its god, and its pharaoh, could easily have consumed the story of its queen without a second thought. Her disappearance became a necessary part of the cleanup, a silent casualty in a war over Egypt's very soul. Her enigmatic absence has made her the perfect canvas for our imaginations. For over a century, filmmakers and novelists have eagerly stepped into the void left by history, spinning tales that transform the Egyptian queen into a figure of grand romance and high-stake conspiracy. In the 1954 epic Land of the Pharaohs, she is a scheming seductress, using her beauty to manipulate a king. A more recent novel might cast her as the star of a sweeping love triangle, torn between a revolutionary husband and a dashing general from the military. These stories thrive on the gaps in the record, turning her silent disappearance into a dramatic climax of assassination or secret exile. They are not concerned with the dry details of co-regencies or religious policy. Instead, they give us a human drama, a woman of flesh and blood motivated by passions we can understand: love, jealousy, and the thirst for power. This fictional Nefertiti is often a pawn or a villain in a man's story, her immense political and religious authority reduced to a plot device. Why does this version of her story resonate so powerfully with us? Perhaps because a queen murdered for love feels more immediate and tragic than a ruler who may have simply changed her name to save a kingdom. These narratives offer a simple, emotional closure that the frustrating ambiguity of archaeology never can. The world of video games has taken this reinvention even further. Here, Nefertiti is not just a character, she is a powerful entity, sometimes a boss to be defeated or an ally who grants magical abilities. She might appear as a guardian of a lost artifact or a spectral force haunting a digital tomb. These interactive portrayals liberate her completely from the historical record, reimagining her as an action hero or a supernatural power. This is the ultimate evolution of her legacy, where mystery is no longer a question to be answered but a tool for storytelling. The real woman, the co-pharaoh who may have ruled as a king, is buried under layers of dramatic license. We have replaced the historical figure with an icon, a symbol of exotic beauty and ancient secrets. Every time a new movie is made or a game is released, the legend grows, and the real Nefertiti retreats further into the shadows. We must ask ourselves, are we searching for the queen of history, or are we in love with the myth we have created? The quiet hum of a radar machine has replaced the archaeologist's pickaxe as the primary tool in the hunt for Nefertiti. Ground-penetrating radar now allows us to see through solid stone, sending pulses of energy deep into the bedrock of the Valley of the Kings and mapping the echoes that return. This technology does not disturb a single grain of sand, yet it can reveal the ghostly outline of a hidden corridor or a sealed chamber with stunning clarity. It was this very tool that detected the tantalizing voids behind the painted walls of Tutankhamun's tomb, sparking a global debate. But radar is only one part of a new technological arsenal. When a mummy is too fragile to unwrap, we can now perform a virtual autopsy with a CT scanner. This medical imaging technology constructs a three-dimensional map of the body hidden within the linen bandages, revealing ancient injuries, cause of death, and even familial relationships without causing any damage. The scan can show us a fatal blow to the skull, the wear of arthritis on the bones, or the delicate shape of the jawline, providing forensic evidence from beyond the grave. Perhaps the most personal tool is digital facial reconstruction. Using the precise skull measurements from a CT scan, specialists can rebuild the face of an anonymous mummy layer by layer, adding muscle, skin, and finally, a lifelike appearance. This process has given faces to unknown pharaohs and commoners alike, bridging a 3,000-year gap with startling intimacy. Imagine applying this technique to the controversial younger lady mummy. If her skull structure were to be digitally fleshed out, and the result bore an uncanny resemblance to the famous limestone bust, the argument for her identity would become almost overwhelming. These tools transform the search from a matter of luck into a scientific investigation. We are no longer just digging in the dirt, we are peering through stone, scanning through bandages, and rebuilding faces from skeletons. Each scan and every DNA sequence is a new piece of evidence in history's oldest cold case, offering a promise that the desert's most tightly held secret may not be safe for much longer. Even with all our technology and theories, fundamental truths about Nefertiti remain locked in the past. The most basic question is also the most haunting: where is her body? A queen of her stature should rest in a tomb of breathtaking splendor, yet we have found no burial chamber we can confidently call hers. Her mummy could be one of the anonymous women already in our museums, or it could lie in a hidden chamber waiting for a final, decisive scan. We do not even know if she died as a queen, revered and mourned, or as a prisoner, stripped of her titles and forgotten in a remote cell. The violence of her erasure suggests a fall so dramatic it required chiseling her face from history itself. Was she Smenkhare? The evidence is tantalizing but circumstantial, a collection of stylistic echoes and political necessities that point to a brilliant disguise. Yet without a single, definitive inscription linking the two names, this theory remains in the realm of compelling speculation. Why was her memory attacked with such particular fury? The destruction went beyond mere political necessity. It felt personal, as if the very sight of her image was an offense that had to be scraped from the stone. Did her heresy run that deep, or was there a more intimate betrayal we can no longer see? We know the what of her erasure, but we may never understand the why. These questions are the legacy she left behind, a silence so profound it still speaks to us across 33 centuries. The mystery of Nefertiti is no longer just about finding a tomb or a mummy. It is about understanding the final, desperate days of a revolution and the woman who stood at its very heart. Her story captivates us because it is an incomplete masterpiece. We are drawn to the powerful combination of her iconic beauty, her revolutionary authority, and that absolute final silence. It is a perfect storm of historical intrigue. A face we recognize instantly is attached to a life story that dissolves into mist just as it reaches its climax. This is not merely an archaeological puzzle, it is a human one. How could someone so central, so visually present, simply cease to be recorded? Her mystery taps into our deep-seated fascination with unresolved stories and vanished glory. We are hardwired to seek closure, to want the final chapter of a book, the last piece of a jigsaw. Nefertiti denies us that satisfaction. Her narrative is a cliffhanger that has lasted for over 3,000 years. She represents a profound loss, not just of a person, but of an entire alternative path for Egypt, a world of sun worship and female power that was systematically dismantled and buried. This makes her more than a historical figure. She becomes a symbol. She is the brilliant woman who disappeared, the ruler who might have become king, the beautiful queen whose tomb is a secret. We project our own questions onto her silent story, questions about power, identity, and how easily a life can be erased from the record. We keep searching because finding her would feel like completing a sentence left unfinished since the dawn of civilization. 3 possible fates stand before the Great Queen, each with its own compelling evidence. The first is a story of tragedy, that she fell to a sudden plague or the ancient peril of childbirth. This is the simplest answer, a quiet end that explains her absence but fails to justify the violent erasure of her memory. The second theory speaks of disgrace, a powerful woman torn down by court intrigue, her likeness chiseled from stone in a calculated act of damnatio memoriae. Yet this, too, feels incomplete, unable to explain why her most intimate rival also vanished, or why the evidence points toward a continued, though hidden, influence. Then, there is the most astonishing possibility that Nefertiti performed the ultimate political transformation. She may have shed her identity to rule as the phantom King Smenkhare, a desperate gambit to save her husband's failing revolution. This theory weaves together the stylistic echoes in art, the sudden emergence of a co-ruler, and the subsequent double erasure of both queen and king, creating a narrative of breathtaking cunning. Her disappearance is far more than a missing person case from antiquity. It is a crack in time, a window into the volatile, dangerous world of Egyptian power politics, where a single misstep could lead not just to death, but to oblivion. The silence surrounding her is the echo of a regime fighting for its life, desperately rewriting its own history to survive. So now we turn the question over to you. After this journey through the evidence, which fate feels most true, do you see a queen who met a tragic end, a rival who was cast out, or a brilliant ruler who became a king to secure her legacy? Share your verdict in the comments below, and if you are captivated by the mysteries of the ancient world, subscribe for more deep dives into the secrets time has tried to forget.